As we mentioned in the previous episode, the Perron family home was not just a house. It was a gathering place for restless and sinister spirits. Some of these entities were considered demons by the Warrens. One of them would constantly wake the family, shouting, "Mama, Mama," in the dead of night, while another appeared to 8-year-old Cindy, whispering chilling words. There are 7 dead soldiers buried within these walls. One particular spirit was so malevolent that the Perron family never spoke openly about what it did. In her book House of Darkness, House of Light, Andrea Perron, the eldest daughter, hinted that this entity may have gone as far as abusing the children. When pressed in an interview, she avoided the question, only replying, "Let's just say there was the spirit of a very, very bad man in that house, with 5 little girls." But the darkest force of all was Bathsheba, a presence that seemed obsessed with tormenting Carolyn Perron. Believed to be the ghost of Bathsheba Sherman, a woman accused of witchcraft and satanic rituals in the 19th century, her story is as disturbing as her presence. As we mentioned in the previous podcast, the Perron house was also inhabited by several evil spirits, some of which the Warrens considered demons. There was one entity that constantly woke the family by shouting, "Mom, Mom," while another apparition always approached 8-year-old Cindy, whispering, "There are 7 dead soldiers buried within the walls." One of the spirits was so malicious that the Perrons never openly discussed its actions. In the book House of Darkness, House of Light, written by Andrea Perron, the eldest of the sisters, it is suggested that this entity may have sexually abused the girls. When she was asked about this in an interview, Andrea avoided the question and only replied to the reporter, "Let's just say there was the spirit of a very, very bad man in that house with 5 little girls." However, the most diabolical being of all was Bathsheba, who seemed focused on tormenting Mrs. Perron. It is believed that this entity was the ghost of Bathsheba Sherman, a satanic practitioner who had lived in that house in the early 19th century, and who died after hanging herself from a tree behind the barn. The Perrons were not a religious family, and it is believed that this absence of faith was the main reason for Bathsheba's extremely violent activity against them. This theory is reinforced by the fact that the previous resident of the house, a religious minister, had never reported any strange events. Lorraine Warren explained, "You only have your faith to protect you. I have always had faith, and God protects me because of it." At that time, the Perrons had no religion at all, and that was very dangerous. Bathsheba was described as a vile being, a creature with a horrible appearance. Her face looked like it was covered with a dry beehive, as if wrapped in cobwebs. Her wrinkled skin barely revealed any trace of humanity. Her hair was gray and loose, and her head always hung to one side, as if her neck were broken. A foul odor filled the room whenever she was present. Bathsheba Thayer was born in 1812 in Rhode Island and married Judson Sherman in March of 1844. She lived a solitary life, away from the community, after being accused of sacrificing her baby as an offering to Satan. The baby's head had been pierced with a sharp object. However, the accusation was dismissed for lack of evidence. It is believed she had 3 other children, none of whom survived past the age of 4. Her children were not her only victims. She also tortured her servants for the most trivial reasons. When she died on May 25, 1885, the coroner said he had never seen anything like it. Within just a few hours, her body had practically mummified, becoming hard as stone. Bathsheba often appeared to Cindy, and she also touched Mr. Perron's neck and back whenever he worked or repaired something in the basement. Over time, it became increasingly clear that this entity hated Carolyn. An article in the Providence Journal from 1977 describes the following. One night before dawn, Mrs. Perron woke up and saw an apparition next to her bed, a woman in an old gray dress, her head tilted to one side. A voice shouted, "Get out! Leave! I will drive you away with death and darkness." At first, Carolyn only felt strong pinches, then slaps, and later objects were thrown at her. The entity soon discovered Carolyn's greatest fear, fire. The attacks intensified, and on one occasion, Carolyn felt a sharp pain in her leg. When she checked, she found a long knitting needle stabbed deep into her skin. Shortly afterward, Bathsheba finally possessed Mrs. Perron. It was then that the family sought the help of Ed and Lorraine Warren. Listen to the conclusion of this story in the third part of our podcast about The Conjuring. As we mentioned in the previous podcast, the Perron house was inhabited by several evil spirits, many of which the Warrens considered to be demons. There was an entity that constantly woke the family, screaming, "Mom! Mom!" Meanwhile, another apparition always approached 8-year-old Cindy, whispering, "There are 7 dead soldiers buried within the walls." One of the spirits was so cruel that the Perrons never openly discussed what it did. In the book House of Darkness, House of Light, written by Andrea Perron, the eldest of the sisters, it is suggested that this spirit may have sexually abused the girls. When Andrea was asked about this in an interview, she avoided the question and only told the reporter, "Let's just say there was the spirit of a very, very bad man in that house, with 5 little girls." But the most diabolical presence of all was Bathsheba. She seemed entirely focused on tormenting Mrs. Perron. It is believed that this entity was the ghost of Bathsheba Sherman, a satanic practitioner who had lived in that house in the early 19th century, and who died after hanging herself from a tree behind the barn. The Perrons were not a religious family, and many believe that this lack of faith was the main reason why Bathsheba's attacks were so violent. This theory is reinforced by the fact that the previous resident of the house, a minister, had never reported any paranormal activity. Lorraine Warren explained it this way: "You only have your faith to protect you. I've always had faith, and God protects me because of it." At that time, the Perrons had no religion at all, and that was very dangerous. Bathsheba often appeared to Cindy, and she would also touch Mr. Perron's neck and back whenever he was working or repairing something in the basement. With time, it became increasingly clear that this entity despised Carolyn. A 1977 article from the Providence Journal describes one of these encounters. On one occasion, before dawn, Mrs. Perron woke up and saw an apparition next to her bed, a woman in an old gray dress, her head hanging unnaturally to one side. A chilling voice shouted at her, "Get out! Leave! I will drive you away with death and darkness." At first, Carolyn only experienced painful pinches. Later, she was slapped, and objects were hurled at her. But the entity quickly discovered her greatest fear: fire. The attacks escalated. Once, Carolyn felt a stabbing pain in her leg. When she looked, she found a long knitting needle buried deep into her skin. Not long after, Bathsheba finally possessed Mrs. Perron. That was when the family sought the help of Ed and Lorraine Warren. Listen to the conclusion of this story in the third part of our podcast on The Conjuring. When the Warrens arrived at the Perron home, they immediately felt the darkness inside. Lorraine Warren later described it as one of the most disturbing cases they had ever faced. Ed and Lorraine decided to conduct a seance to try to communicate with the spirits and to release Carolyn from Bathsheba's grip. During the ritual, the atmosphere in the house became unbearably heavy. The family gathered in fear as Carolyn's body began to twist violently. Her voice changed, and she spoke in a guttural tone that did not belong to her. According to the Perron children, their mother was lifted from the ground and thrown across the room with an inhuman force. Terrified, the family pleaded for the Warrens to stop the seance. Lorraine agreed, and they ended the ritual immediately, but the damage was already done. From that moment, the activity in the house became even more intense. The Warrens advised the Perrons to leave the property, but the family had nowhere else to go. They were forced to endure the haunting for nearly 10 years, until they finally moved out in 1980. Despite the trauma, the Perrons survived. Andrea Perron, the eldest daughter, later wrote 3 volumes of House of Darkness, House of Light, documenting everything her family experienced. She has often said that while the haunting was terrifying, it was also a strange part of their lives that bonded them forever. Bathsheba's legend continues to live on. Some believe she was truly a witch who offered her soul to Satan. Others think she was only a troubled woman whose story was twisted over time. But for the Perron family, there was no doubt. Something evil lived in that house, and it wanted to destroy them. This story inspired James Wan's film The Conjuring, bringing worldwide attention to the Perron haunting and the Warrens' work. But beyond Hollywood, the real events remind us that sometimes the darkest horrors are not on the movie screen, but within the walls of our own homes.